Welcome to the Rev Engine Podcast, where we help B2B CEOs and revenue leaders get clarity on how to align sales and marketing, build a high-performing revenue engine, and accelerate revenue growth for their organizations. I'm your host, Jeff Davis, author of award-winning book Create Togetherness and founder of Rev Engine. Hey, everybody, it is Jeff Davis with another episode of the Rev Engine Podcast, where we help B2B CEOs and revenue leaders align sales and marketing, transform their revenue engine, and accelerate revenue growth. Today's guest is Gabe Larsen. He is the head of marketing at Meta. We have known each other for some time. We actually met. He was invited to, and actually we were co-hosts for an event I ran for many years called the Sales and Marketing Alignment Summit, which maybe I'll bring back. We'll have to see. Well, that's another conversation.
You should.
Yeah.
That was a classy event. It was classy.
I appreciate that. And then this thing called COVID happened. And I was like, oh, we got to do something different.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
No, it's not going to work. But either way, I follow his career, follow his content. He is another marketing leader that I appreciate, understands the importance of aligning with sales and talking with sales leadership, and really gets it. So with that, Gabe, I just want you to tell people a little bit about your history, your background, what you're up to, and then we'll dive into the conversation. That works.
Love it. Yeah. Again, it's so fun to be back on. How long since we had chatted, Jeff? It's
gonna be like 3 or 4 years. I don't know. I feel like COVID, it all is like one long year.
It feels like that, right? And at the same time, it's like, hey, we pick up right where we left off. So I love reconnecting. Thanks for the reach out. Just a little bit about myself. Yeah, I'm currently running a small division marketing here at Meta, formerly Facebook, still getting used to that change. Been here a couple of years, was part of an acquisition from a customer support company called Customer, based out of New York City. Joined with them fairly young, about 10 million in ARR, and then ended up selling to Facebook about 2 years into my stint for a little over $1 billion. Great transaction, and I've really loved my time at Meta. And I think we'll dive into some of the cool things that we've been thinking and doing, bringing kind of the startup mentality to this idea of B2B and in Meta. Anyways, prior to that, that's where Jeff and I met. I was in a company called InsideSales.com and ran the marketing team there, really trying to disrupt this idea of field sales and build a high velocity model that was a predictable, repeatable engine for sales and marketing to produce the growth results that they want. So been in the startup space for coming a dozen, 12, 15 years now. Before that, man, what was I doing before that, Jeff? I thought I wanted to be a consultant. I spent 5 years in the Middle East doing some consulting. I was in New York thinking I was a financial analyst at Goldman Sachs for a little bit. I've messed around, but I'm now a true SaaS kind of guy. So I'm here. I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think all your experiences, one of the things I love about having people like you, leaders like you in the show, is that those people that have those varied experiences and those, dare I say, non-traditional career tracks, I think it adds so much color to how you lead as a leader, especially when it comes to collaboration, which more than ever we need, because, B2B is getting more challenging and complex, and you add and throw digital in there, things even get more crazy. But selfishly, beyond catching up, which I always love to do, I really wanted to explore the idea of how, as a B2B revenue leader, do I leverage the metaverse? I think for a lot of people, and obviously depends on the industry, tech B2B folks have probably thought about this already, but folks outside of tech may or may not have really thought about this. And I wanted to get your perspective on how have you seen organizations across different industries kind of leverage the metaverse to their advantage?
Yeah, this one's, I think, still interesting, and it'll play itself out. I get asked it a lot because I happen to work at Meta. By no means am I some guru on what Mark Zuckerberg does, but I can tell you some of the things that, we've been doing and the way I think, maybe you guys should be thinking a little bit about it. I do have my Oculus sitting right here, and so I am a fan of some of the things on that. The game's pretty cool, but I would say a couple things. One is, and COVID certainly introduced this, right? There's two sides to this spectrum, and we've got to find a better balance. One, I don't really want to go into the office all the time. And two, having a screen like this, or 4 screens as I have, it's not right. It's not optimal. There's something missing. We all feel it. And it's something over here. And it is by definition something that's a little more 3D, something that's a little more interactive. And so I think when it comes to the way in which we work as marketers, we've got to change. We've got to adapt. And I think that's going to be one of the primary areas that I try to play around with, that we try to play around with, to make the work experience better. Because again, I'm not in the office, and no offense to Zoom, that's not cutting it, the screen that I look at 12 hours. So how do we make it more interactive, more in person without actually being in person? I love that. I think there's a lot there. The way we work needs to change. And I'm loving some of the tips, tools, and techniques there. So that would be one where I'd start. Probably my favorite area. Secondarily, I think another way to think about it is just small bite-sized steps. Sometimes you're like, do I need to build an app for the Oculus? So it's like, what are you talking about? No, I think the nice iteration is think video, right? So video, man, we found so many different ways over the last, I'm not saying still say it over the last handful of years to bring video into the day-to-day business. I mean, as a customer service company, I still spend a lot of my time in that realm. I love coming across companies when they have a challenge with one of their consumers. There's a link and all of a sudden we're on video, or they're showing literally the furnace that's not working and they're working to solve it remotely. And I'm like, that's so powerful. Demos, I was just debating with somebody the other day in marketing around gating demos, not gating demos. What should your videos be like, this hero asset? And either way, I'm like, God, it's so great to see video play a bigger role in us, maybe get away from some of this concept of gating in marketing. Yeah. So you've got so many fun things around video happening. What's one more layer on that? What if you were able to provide, I'm going to use the word 3D here, but like a 3D experience of your product, something that was more real. Like right now I can just pop up and watch a quick video, but what if I could watch more of an interactive video with somebody in this concept of the metaverse, where I could then interact with the product in a way that, man, it takes demos, not light years from where we are, but oh, I could actually touch that thing, or can I play with it in this area? Like I can experience it in a more real way. I think that's fascinating, right? So I love when people kind of approach it. How do we take video and take it maybe 2 or 3 steps further and bring it into some of these concepts of quote unquote the metaverse? So that'd be number 2. I think number 3 is, and this doesn't apply to everybody, and B2B might be slightly behind. It always is with B2C, but you are opening up a whole new avenue. I mean, with tools and technologies like the Oculus, we talk a lot with our B2C companies around support in the metaverse, right? Like you have your product there, just like you would in the App Store, just like you have it on Amazon, or just like you have it on some sort of third-party site, and someone's accessing that. How do you run support in that world? So it's such a big area, an unknown area, that I think it's worth starting to contemplate. It might be a new business idea for you, or it might be a new channel for you to market. It might be an interesting way to advertise to core audiences, because again, think of it like a mini World Wide Web, or think of it like an app store. So those are 3 things that I think are kind of fun. And just to summarize, I don't mean to ramble too much, Jeff.
That sounds good. No, it's great stuff.
Way we work is fascinating. 2, baby step it, think video. Where could you take video further? And I think you'll inch towards this concept. And then 3 is recognize it is a whole other platform that could be, like what if a new app store is, as big as Apple started? What could you do with that? Target your audience better with an ad. Is there a way you could service your customers better in using that kind of communication platform? So those are 3 things maybe to get the conversation started.
No, I love that. And, and I think it is a little bit of the chicken and egg with B2B, because, as you said, B2B, follows B2C 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
It's always right. And I think as a B2B revenue leader, you've got to justify there's a critical mass of customers on the platform. And I don't know what that looks like for your business, but one of the things you made me think of was, I think this should potentially be very helpful for B2B companies that have very complex or highly scientific products. Because to your point, what sparked in me was it's much easier to give a 3D demo that I can touch and feel and take things apart in this virtual environment versus trying to explain that over a Zoom call or something like that, where the customer can't actually, unscrew the thing and be like, oh, that's how that works. And I spend my time, the early part of my career in healthcare sales, but we run across device and surgery reps. And so that's another one where you're talking to surgeons.
Man, and sometimes there's so many broad use cases, but, B2B tech is one that I think might take a little more time. But man, if you start to branch into like education, I mean, at my school, my kids, they're learning about, I spent 5 years, I said, in the Middle East, and I really love the culture and love it out there. And so they're literally taking a tour of Dubai. They did it 2 nights ago in a way that you can't get through a book. Now you talk about medical. I mean, now all of a sudden I don't have to, I can run full surgical procedures, in a way that is not a video. It's not a book. I think that's transforming that space. So it's kind of like the AI, these types of things, they take time. This generative AI, we'll find a way to bring it in. Hopefully it won't take over the world and all that random stuff, but
at some point, we'll probably be dead.
Some industries are a little better than others. So I love that. That's a great example of surgery. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're in a space and time, I feel, and you can tell me if you feel the same way, where there's just a lot of noise. I think as I look at it, COVID forced companies to do digital, whether they wanted to or not, some better than others. Many of them were bumbling and fumbling and probably still are. But if nothing else, it created a ton of more just digital noise, right? Because everybody's like, I got to do something and I don't know how to do it, but just throw some money at it and hopefully it works. And I think what I start to see is that customers are getting overwhelmed and they're just tuning out because to them it all looks like white noise. So you can't stop doing digital as a marketer, as an organization. How have you seen, or what are some of your thoughts on how do you actually, we always ask this, right? But I think more than ever, it's more important now than ever. How do you break through and actually have a compelling conversation that people want to listen to?
Yeah. I mean, look, this is the question always of how do you do better, faster, stronger? And especially when we're all kind of trying to do some of the same things. And this one has become more of a passion to me. And I don't know, you hear these buzzwords, inbound marketing or even ABM. I've started to get a little bit of a gag reflex when I hear the word ABM for some reason. I don't know. It feels a little bit like that children's story. I got a couple kids, The Emperor's New Clothes. I don't know if you remember them. Story where it's like, I think most people know it, but a long story short, these children end up laughing at this emperor who's basically not wearing any clothes because these swindlers trick him into believing that he's wearing these magical, expensive, beautiful clothes, and they happen to be really nothing at all. And I don't know, some of these marketing principles, Jeff, I hear about it, and I'm going to use ABM just as an example. I talk to peers sometimes. What do you hear? It's, ABM is so important. It unifies sales and marketing. It does. Okay. It's a modern, modern companies, GTM uses ABM, or, we use a 1-to-1, 1-to-few, 1-to-many, and it's like, 1-to-1, what? But then truthfully, I follow up with those same people 6 to 9 months later, and hey man, how's that ABM program working? And what am I hearing? And well, Gabe, it's a long play. So, you don't really see ROI on ABM very long. I bought an ABM tool a few years ago, and truthfully, we just canceled it a couple of years later. Or our ABM program is really just our general marketing program. Or I don't know. I'm like, feeling sometimes like this Emperor New Clothes type of thing. Like, hey, I thought it was supposed to be beautiful and change the world. And you're telling me it's going to take years and years and years to get an ROI. Like, I don't have years. I got days,
Right.
So that's one thing that's probably a little bit too much context, but something that's been cooking in my mind. The other thing that's really different is when you're at a company like Meta, I don't know, there's just more constraints on you, right? So I'm not saying I was like an email spammer or something like that. Like it takes me on average about 6 months to get a contract of a fairly small contract through for all the different things you need to jump through, security, privacy, et cetera, et cetera. So I just operate in such a different world now where maybe you can't be as kind of scrappy and rugged as you once were.
And you can get stuff out faster.
I've just been thinking some of these different ideas have been converging. And I'm like, I still got to win. I still got to cut through the noise. How do I start to do that? And the bottom line is I was like, I have to start listening more than acting.
Okay.
And that sounds super simple. But one of the phrases I've been playing with is this idea of signal-based marketing. And what that basically means to me is, look, I think there's some great concepts in ABM for those who actually think it means what they think it means. But targeting people, it's a great idea. Sending them gifting. I've always loved physical gifts, being more personalized. Like I like that stuff, but you got to understand it's still, what is this? Do I want this crap? Or I'm not even I'm one of your buyers. You thought I was your buyer. I'm not one of your buyers. I'm not in the buying cycle. I bought a product 2 years ago. It's still noise. It's still like, dude, I don't want this. Like, why are you hitting me up right? One of the things we've been playing a lot with is the concept of signals. Like, what if I could, and the idea can really start to, I think, spread and grow. But in some companies, I think are good at this, but putting this into principle, I'll tell you, Jeff, it's ask a lot of marketers. It's all duct tape and bail wire. It's so damn hard to do, because if you really were able to identify the 15 or 20 or 30 signals that lead to great customers in your business, and you were able to capture those and put those in a machine and then utilize them in an effective way, it's a really difficult, man. And I'm all open for listeners. If you felt like you found some ways, I've got a couple things I've been doing the last 5 years around this, but long story short, let me get tactical just for a minute. In our business, we found, for example, Shopify, right? Like if you buy Shopify, if you're somebody that we think is a prospect and we get a signal that you've bought Shopify in a very simple concept, that's great for us. When you buy Shopify, you're actually X times more likely to buy this tool set in Meta. Now you start to add on some of these other signals, and I won't bore you, but you could go through some of the basics, job change alerts, people hiring customer support reps, of funding announcement, whatever it might be. Some of the stuff we all know. BDRs, a lot of BDRs are like, Gabe, I try to do this manually. That's why we hire an army of BDRs to try to figure this stuff out every day.
Yeah.
But if you're able to grab and just listen, just stop for a minute, and you grab some of these signals and you start to mesh them together, and then all of a sudden you reach out to the right person, the right time, using the right signal, and you're like, oh yeah, I am interested. This is the right product that I want. And so again, man, and some of you might be like, Gabe, again, this is target-based marketing. This isn't that difficult. But I'm telling you guys, duct tape and bail wire. Tell me what your 25 signals are right now that lead to higher predictiveness of your customer. And then if you happen to know that, which your BDRs probably do, marketing probably doesn't, is it automated and systemized in a way that actually facilitates a nurture strategy that builds from one person to millions of people? So if I have a target person, I now know that they buy Shopify and they're looking for customer support reps. Am I building a customer profile around that? And then starting to engage with them in an automated way that pings them around those signals so that I'm getting them at the right time and right way. It's tough. Marketo's tough. Outreach is tough. Bringing Zoom info is tough. Bringing in, the database, the customer profile data. So anyways, the concept of listening more, using signals more, I think it's going to align better with the future of the market, certainly where I am, where privacy concerns matter a lot. Again, spamming people, you got to be careful. You got to reach out the right time, right place, right program. Also doing it in a way that is, a lot of companies are red ocean. They're in a place where we already have that tool set. And so you got to find a way to say, hey, when are they going to buy? Finding the right time, right person, right place. I mean, signal marketing concepts, I think, can really resonate, but building it is tough. So anyways, I'm rambling again a little bit, but loving this concept. I think there's something to it to kind of cut through the noise as we think about making ABM real, thinking about inbound marketing and pushing those aside and say, maybe there's a combination here. And I've been using the word signal marketing.
I think it's interesting because it's related to a topic that I've been talking a lot about lately on the bark inside of my brain, which is dark social. And that's, these proliferation of kind of these, private forums and private groups where leaders are talking that vendors don't have access to.
Right.
Different than kind of like influencer marketing where people are out and talking about you. How do you get your name on a short list in these forums that you're not invited to? And so I was thinking, as you were talking about listening, I would take it one step further to say, like, it's the listening and then it's being able to formulate a different approach, because a lot of times what we're struggling is the whole force feeding people doesn't work anymore. They are shutting off and they're huddling together and talking about you behind your back, so to say. Yep. But there are a lot of times, like you said, digital signals, but we just have to get better as organizations of listening, interpreting, and then turning it into insights and action. And I think that is definitely a skill set.
Therein lies the challenge, right? It's like we spend so much time going outbound to these people, which I'm not saying we shouldn't. You got to do
that's kind of where I'm going.
But it's like, I've talked to a couple of peers, and look, Facebook, I happen to work, at this organization, so take it for it's a grain of salt, but a lot of Facebook groups they're fascinating and they're doing a lot of stuff. Even I think in the B2B space, nobody's monitoring those. No one's listening to those. Like, are you kidding? No one's getting signals from that type of stuff. It's like, I can barely review my G2 crowd stuff. Gabe, I got so much ABM outbound stuff I'm doing,
Yeah.
And it's like, what if you could though? What if you could monitor a community in a way that is actionable and interesting without just throwing bodies at it or having BDRs trying to spend hours and hours trying to sift through that stuff. And that's that concept of, man, have we done enough listening? Have we spent enough time on that side of it? I love your extra point. Because once you listen and you actually find a community where all these peers, these marketing leaders are chatting, I mean, do you have to do it manually? Again, do you have to put your BDR? Is there a way you could actually get in there or action it in a way that's appropriate? And now you've got a signal that is extremely powerful, that you're listening and is changing the game for your business. I just don't feel like we're talking about that enough because I'm hearing so much. Let's do more. Let's spend more on Google. Let's do more targeted outbound. Let's send more ads to them. And I'm not saying it's bad. It doesn't work sometimes.
Well, it is many times bad when you are not doing more because of an insight. You're just doing more because, let me make sure I'm saying this the right way. You've seen incremental growth, but you can't explain where it's coming from. So you just say, we'll throw money at everything in hopes that it will continue to grow, but really not sitting down and doing the analysis to find out where your ROI is. I mean, I've seen plenty of times where you run campaigns and they're like, oh, it's amazing. I was like, that's an N of one. And the N of one is not a trend. N of one is the N of one. So let's do a little bit more experimentation. And to your point, I like this concept of listening. And I like that might be the theme of the show, but listening from a marketing standpoint and then turning it into insights to action. And that, I think, why people might have a visceral reaction to that is that it forces you to slow down instead of just continue to throw money on stuff.
That's right. Yeah. It's sometimes more fun just, spread it across everywhere and see what kind of pops. And look, there's different phases in different companies, but as we wrap this, we probably I could ramble about it for a while, but because I've tried to build more of a system around this, and I'm trying to mentor a couple of startups to see if I can get some more technology that's designed specifically to do this rather than get duct tape and Baylor, Marketo, and Malreach, and Zoom, some of the different, your website altogether with the customer profile, technology, et cetera. But one exercise I love doing and just seeing if you can do here is, what if you had to note down your top 10 signals on the marketing from a marketing team, do you know what those are? And is there a way to manually start to approach them in a way that's more strategic? That might be just a fun question to cook on for a minute. While you're listening to this nonsensical podcast.
Not nonsensical. It's value-based podcasting. I know that's a thing, but I just created it.
I'm not rambling a little bit. I give myself a hard time.
Well, slightly off topic, so you did say something that made me think. So you've had a lot of experience at smaller organizations, and now you're kind of embedded in a really large organization. And we tend to talk to mid-market and large organizations. How have you been successful? I'm assuming you have been, and you haven't, just go with it, of being able to keep that scrappiness of execution in a larger ecosystem? Because I can see, and I've talked to leaders that are bought in, like, I've got to operate differently. I'm in this, Fortune 100, Fortune 250 behemoth, but we're just too slow. How can you start that process, or what are some things that people should be thinking about?
Yeah. Look, I'm living every day in that type of stuff. A couple of things I'd say. One is, a lot of times people feel like bigger organizations. That's always the myth, right? It's like, oh, you worked at Salesforce. They've got everything figured out. But you go look at Salesforce and you start pulling back the covers, like, got the same problems across the board. So I still believe that a scrappy mentality of let's get stuff done and let's try to move quick still resonates and can still make things happen at larger organizations. With that said, you can't get it done by yourself, like the cross-functional relationships, because you own a smaller piece of the pie, right? Like we have other products in the portfolio and they're upsell products to ours. And if you want to do a campaign, it's not like you just run it to market. It's a joint campaign with another product leader, and then there's different levels of approval you got to get. So you call it politics if you want. I don't think it is. I just think it's cross-functional campaigns or cross-functional management. And you have got to be a winner for everybody. Back to some sports analogy for you Chicagoans. There's no I in team or something, right? Like you just have to set up a structure and an organization where you brief your counterparts and you get people on board, and then you move it together. And then you can take one giant step, whereas in startup, you can do such fast steps, but I do think you can, you get these cross-functional people. The other thing is, I don't know if you need to go so big. I actually find it's just like it works in startup land. There's ways to run experiments and small tests in larger organizations where you don't have to try to then like eat the elephant all in one bite. We did a huge campaign in France. Millions of dollars were spent. You don't have that luxury in startup land to do an activation like that. Boy, was that an awesome experience. But, we're doing some other small stuff. We grab a small group of people, we run it, and you can still figure that out and run kind of that tiger team. And that works, I think, as well as it does. What do they say? Nail it and scale it type of, that works in big, it works in small. So there's differences. Like I said, there's some red tape, there's some approvals. But I think sometimes people lose that mentality and they're like, well, I got to let other people run it. No, you can still run it. You just got to bring people along to be successful.
Yeah. So the two things I heard now, which I think are really good, and I will definitely take the stealing from. First and foremost, as a leader, if you want to kind of adapt this agile mentality, becoming a master at navigating the organization, because I think to your point, many of us get so focused on execution in our funnel and trying to make that faster when actually you as a leader, your job is to get people out of your people's way. And so if you are able to master the matrix, I think that's one way to move faster and get things done and just have a peer group conversation. Like, look, Jeff, I know we're trying to do this thing, I heard from what we're doing, might be a little bit at risk. We have great relationship. Okay, go. And we'll see where it goes. The other thing is the idea of running pilots. And so even if that's at risk, having a small team on your team, just spin this up, see what it does. If it has some positive results, then we have something to stand on and say look, we ran this pilot, super small, but this is back to your point, the nail it and scale it thing. And then you have a use case for your business partners.
Yeah, that word, I felt more in startup land, like execution is obviously so important, but the word influence becomes extremely important. My ability to influence others, to allow me to run a pilot, to join this endeavor, to run this campaign jointly, your influencing skills become just as important as your execution skills.
Yeah. And probably even more so as you transition from a startup, small organization to a larger one, especially if you have that startup mentality. Because I found when I've worked in large organizations, because that's just where my mind is, and I've been in startups for many years, it's just, I just want to get stuff done. And that just doesn't work in a large organization, especially with people that have been there for years. It just does. Trust me, I've tried. It does not work. So influence is, I think, the currency to get things through a large organization when you're trying to be agile. So I like those 2 points. Let's transition over to related, but slightly different, customer experience. I know you've spent a lot of time in customer experience. It's something I talk a lot about because I think the only way that you're able to actually provide an amazing customer experience is through alignment. I always start with sales and marketing and then the other functions. How have you seen AI and some of the new technologies being able to enable, I think that actually is right, able to enable organizations to execute on CX in a different way, better? What's your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, this is like the conversation of the year, the last couple of years, right? And especially we talk about here this concept of the year of efficiency. And I think everyone's in the year of efficiency. And we just have to find ways to be smarter, better, faster, right? And so again, I think these are types of things you got to go crawl, walk, run on. I just think it becomes daunting when you're like, how do I get ChatGPT to run my business? It's like, it feels just like, I don't know
that I want it running my business, but okay. I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Whatever it might be, or, how do I use AI to transform my company? It's like, whoa, that's a big question, but it's like, hey, have you looked at your customer support agents and figured out what the top 10 reasons for calls are? And have you found an automated approach to have, I'm going to use the word AI, be able to resolve some of those concerns in a cost-effective manner? If you haven't, that's probably where you should start. Got tons of companies. And I do think both in B2C and in B2B, B2C makes it is such a clear example because we all know it. But,
right.
I buy stuff all the time and I'm always wondering, where's my order? Are you going to make me pick up the phone and call? And this was COVID, COVID, this was like I think it was one of the top search terms. And, it's like, where's my order? But, are you going to make me call and waste time with people and reps? And again, I'm using a B2C example here, but such a great thing to be able to build some life, some science into some sort of capability on your information page, your chat, the multiple areas you can kind of get that into it. Allow someone to interact with a bot and say, hey, here's my order number. What's going on with it? And have it spit back to them and say, hey, this is more or less what's going on. I mean, B2B companies, go to your login thing, for example. I mean, how many challenges to support people get with some user not being able to log in? Have you found a way to use AI in some basic, fundamental, easy way to just deflect the easy answers? And that's usually where I talk to businesses and where we even talk to businesses. Cause I don't get me wrong. I think that there's so many other ways you can go into. One of the things we're seeing is, in the suggestions and supporting reps, is a customer support rep. It's so difficult, as you can imagine, especially if you're a complex sale. You get a question and then you're often alone. I mean, companies think they do a good job. Sometimes it's called swivel chair interface. It's like, I open this system, I'm swiveling over here, I'm swiveling over there. I go talk to this person, I run down to the shipping department. Whatever it is, it's like, it's so hard to find the information needed to be able to piece together this, and that, and then give an answer that makes sense. Oh, my heart. I didn't know this being not in this space as much, but my heart goes out to the frontline, customer service agents who took the barrage in COVID, and I still think are feeling a lot of that. But that aside, supporting them with like real-time suggestions or feedbacks, so it's like, hey, I got this answer, and all of a sudden the system's like, I listened or I heard that information. Yep. Here's what I would say, or here's what I'd recommend based on what this person is saying. And you're supporting reps and giving them information so they kind of become that super rep, the Iron Man, if you will, of customer service. So I think there's so many fun things there, but it just gets a little bit, whoa. Take a deep breath. Find your top customer service request, B2C, B2B. Then let's have a real conversation about deflection. How can you do that? And it could be, some people just put it in support articles. That's obviously like level one.
Right.
Sometimes support articles aren't enough. Can you get something that's a little more intelligent, or embedding intelligence into a chat bot on your support page? And now we're interacting with that and things like login information or where's my order. And you'd be surprised. That might be 10% of your, now we're back in the year of efficiency. Now we're talking about, so I think with these types of things, it's got to be crawl, walk, run, focus on the basics and then take.
Yeah. Because when I talk about CX, I am the master of trying to keep things simple. I really ask people to think about it from the perspective of the customer. That's really how I see CX. It is about, is the customer experience you're providing about you or about the customer? More often than not, it's about us. I need you to do this. I need you to do this. Marketers were notorious for, we need to get through these stages of the journey. Salespeople, same thing. I need to do the sales process. And, I worked with a company a long time ago, and I think I've shared it in the podcast. And when I came in, the first thing I asked was like, well, let's walk through the sales process. Like, what does this look like? And at every stage, there was just friction. I was like, you really don't want anybody's money. Clearly don't want their money, because it was so daunting. And the simple questions I would ask, they were like, we don't have an answer to that. I was like, and this is why you're seeing such a drop off. But it wasn't until somebody objectively sat down and said, okay, so I do this, then what happens? We don't know. That's a problem. If you don't know, that's a problem. So I keep it simple. Flip when you're planning and you're organizing, you're thinking through, sit on the other side of the table and say, like, how does the customer experience this work? Can we make this experience better? And technology can do that, AI, whatever it is, that's great. But we sometimes get too caught up in, well how do we use AI? What is the problem first?
And it's like, I had somebody the other day, be like, Gabe, I don't want a Ferrari. I just want what did he say? Maybe he said a wheelbarrow or something. I mean, he probably was listening, the wheelbarrow. Now I'm thinking that doesn't make as much sense, but the concept of just like, man, my business just isn't, I don't know if we're ready for all this fancy stuff. To your point, like we're still talking about trying to solve gaps, and there's nothing worse than the shiny object syndrome. And I'll raise my hand. I'm a marketer. I always want the latest gadget to solve problems. I don't have to work as hard or something. But the truth is, right, a bad system or a great system topped on a bad process makes everything worse. So if you don't have a system with a good process, now you're talking about optimization. So I do love that, man. I got the squirrel syndrome like everybody, but boy, don't think systems are saviors. They're not. They do make bad processes even worse.
Yeah. And if your strategy is terrible, technology will just speed up the terribleness of it. It will not make it better. Please stop using.
I wish that was not the case, but it absolutely, unequivocally.
It's just like people are sold on like, oh, well, if we just get this platform, I'm like, no, your strategy is terrible. Like you need to fix that. You don't need technology, and don't blame them the technology that's not working because your strategy is terrible. But that's another conversation for another day, maybe another episode. But we'll have you back on. That's my way to secretly get you back on the show.
That's right, man. Anytime.
If I look back in the past, like when we actually first met and we were working together on like this whole idea of sales marketing alignment and how you as a marketing leader work working with your sales colleagues, I always love to talk to folks like you that have done it. What are some of the tips and tricks you would give marketing leaders that have been listening, or even CEOs, of how marketing leaders and sales leaders can start the conversation to work together in a different way? And the reason I want to specifically ask you is I've heard a lot of folks say like, look, we have a good personal relationship, but like we just don't work together, which is dysfunctional. I'm sorry. I'm glad you guys like each other, but it's just dysfunctional. So thoughts of how to start that conversation.
Oh man, this one's not going away. So let me throw out a couple ideas.
Yes, this podcast will be on for a while.
Yeah. Look, man, you hit one of those things. It's a problem that I don't want to say it's unsolvable. It's just, it takes constant. That's what it is. It takes constant. It's not a one-time thing. You can't just solve it. It's like a constant thing you got to review. Yeah. And with that, you'll have a hard time stick-to-itiveness, if you will. So yeah, a couple things I would say to that. One, I do think some organizations are finding some success with a leader who oversees both,
okay.
Depending on your size, a true CRO who doesn't oversee, CX or customer success and sales, but oversees like marketing and sales. You put it under one umbrella. You kind of have one, I don't like the word throat to choke, but one person on the hook, and there's something there. So I think that's an interesting thing I've been talking to a couple CEOs about, and I'll be interested to see how that stuff turns out. Secondarily, there's nothing like having rules of engagement. And this is where I think it gets a little tough because it's hard to systematize this stuff. But one of the challenges, and it's become I think we've made so much progress in this area, which is like lead scoring. If you would have asked me 15 years ago, when I was talking with salespeople around quality of leads, there was just nothing. I felt like the wild, wild west, the true, like the stuff you're giving me is garbage and you don't even handle the garbage I'm giving you.
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel like there's a lot of sales leaders and market leaders have been able to come together and be like, hey, there's a lead score. We kind of agreed to it. And we'll take these things that now come to us that hit a certain threshold. Doesn't mean it's perfect. I don't know. There seems to be some sort of like general agreement because there's a score. It's systematized,
Yeah.
Boy, I feel like the handoff between, I've seen a few organizations do this, the handoff between, I'm going to say the marketing org, which could be marketing and BDR, to sales. It's way too subjective. It's still using words like BANTs. And I'm not saying even BANTs is that bad, but honestly, if you're talking about a word that was a bit more or less invented by IBM in 1960, I try to make it a challenge in my life to not use things that are super duper old, specifically in work. I mean,
right.
Well, you just can't use that.
It's not relevant.
It's too old. I don't care what it is. Just don't even use the freaking word on me, come up with something new, let alone it's not systematized. But I found a couple organizations, and I'm getting tactical for a minute, who have been like opportunity scoring, so a BDR will more or less with the marketing support answer a certain number of questions. They'll fill out a little bit of a form in Salesforce. It actually calculates a score. Once it hits a certain threshold, it basically can then move over to the sales team. And it takes this idea of, I didn't really think that person was qualified, or I didn't think the BDR did good enough, or the marketing information wasn't strong. But now again, you've got some sort of measurement stick to have a conversation on. So I love that. One, because it's systemized. Two, because it's now defined. You're taking a word like BANT or ANM. And again, I keep using this example, but I could get into more. But you're actually putting concrete, non-subjective, objective items around it. So it's like, if I answered the question, what current technology is this prospect using? And I'm able to answer 3 or 4 of those, and I'm at now 90 out of 100, that's passable over. We've just taken this concept of a subjective word like BANT, like budget, who have budget, and we've now crystallized it. We've put it in our system. Oh my goodness, I love it. And so organizations who are going that direction, who are taking rules of engagement and putting them not in some random Google Doc, but bringing it into a day-to-day where it's measurable, actionable, and systematized. I love it. I commend you for it. So I love that. Outside of that, so I really am a big believer at a fairly early age in a startups company. And certainly as you get bigger, man, the emergence of Rev Ops is awesome.
Yeah. And for those that don't know what it is, because not everybody has Rev Ops, tell them really quick what Rev Ops is.
Yeah. I think some people are defining it slightly different in different organizations, but it's almost like in the old school language, think of like the chief operations officer. In old school big companies, you'd be like, there was a CMO, a chief sales officer, a chief operations officer, chief finance officer. It's almost like you've taken the concept of the chief operations officer, by the way, which is an independent functional area that sits on the management team, again, in old school businesses, and you've brought it down into life in this Rev Ops thing. And again, they're overseeing in many ways a mini COO. Now, a lot of them focus just on the revenue chain, like how operationally things are structured, process, business, budget, numbers through the revenue cycle. But a lot of them are taking even a broader view. But the power of it that I've seen is some of those old school mentality pieces. Like, look, sales and marketing are and always will be an interesting marriage. Two partners who sometimes get along and sometimes don't. And guess what happens? Sometimes partners don't get along. There's divorces. And if you've ever handled a divorce without some sort of mitigation lawyer, there usually needs to be a third party. It's very difficult. I literally experienced this with a very dear friend. They decided to try not to go for any third party. It was miserable. They were trying to use me. I am actually throwing me in the middle.
You're like, I'm not qualified for this. So I'm not signing up for this.
I was more talking to them about which furniture, they should take. I guess they're being cheap, but boy, is it powerful. And I'm never advocating for divorce, but I'll tell you want to get a divorce done well, you have a third party entity that's objective, real, that kind of can mitigate and bring two people and find the right balance. This Rev Ops function that I've seen in certain organizations that has a seat at the table isn't reporting to the sales leader. That isn't going to work. Have you ever had a lawyer? Well, I won't go into anybody. You get the analogy, but you can't have a Rev Ops person report into marketing or sales and expect them to be objective.
A little bias, just a little bias there.
Look, I've had friends in the industry be like, look, I wanted to do things differently, but obviously my boss is the one paying my check and doing my promotion. So I'm not going to tell him he's wrong. And so again, you have that third party entity who has a seat at the table, is given the dominion, is given the power to uphold the process. Any escalations, it basically doesn't roll to the sales leader, it rolls to this independent entity. And all of a sudden, you've got a divorce lawyer who it's amazing what they can do. Because truthfully, if they're good, they're going to tell marketing 50% of the time to just shut up. And 50% of the time, they're going to tell sales to shut up. So I love that. And I love the emergence of Rev Ops in a lot of these startup companies. More power to you. Give them. The challenge is they're not given enough say. They're growing up. They're these people who are growing up in sales ops or marketing ops. And so a lot of people consider them to be Salesforce admins, and they still report to sales, or they don't have the respect because they don't sit on the management team. I'm a big believer. Get them in there, get them on the E team, especially in startup land, and give them that independent behavior to bring those two together. Because honestly, it's tough. Those would be 3 ideas for you to cook off, maybe.
No, I love it. And I know you're a busy guy, so I'm going to close out, but I do love kind of ending on this idea of sales and marketing being a marriage, because I 200% agree. And for a good marriage, you need communication. And what I've seen more often than not is just not coming to the table and having a communication about what's working, what's not working. So that'll be my free therapy, marriage therapist advice for you. And I've been doing the sales and marketing alignment thing for a minute. It seems to always start about actually communicating effectively. So hopefully that will help some folks out there that are trying to change that relationship and improve the overall Rev Engine. So for those that want to get in contact with you, learn more about you, follow your work, what is the best way to get in contact with Gabe Larsen?
Yes. You can
Please not give us your address. I'm kidding.
That's right.
I'm kidding.
You need my social security number? Sure. Yeah.
You give me that.
It's mother's maiden name. Okay. Yeah. No, look, truthfully, man, Jeff, back in the day, I was a LinkedIn addict, man. I loved that stuff. It's been a whirlwind the last couple of years, but still love LinkedIn. That's always going to be the best place. Feel free to hit me up there. You just find it at Gabe Larsen, and that's Larsen with an EN. But yeah, hit me up there. I'd love to continue the dialogue. Always happy to chat.
Awesome. All right, sir. Well, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate the insights, and we will be looking forward to following you and see what you do next.
Love it, man. Be good. Talk soon.
All right, you too.
Thanks for listening to the Rev Engine Podcast. I hope today's episode provided you with some actionable insights that will help you begin the process of transforming your organization to a high-performing revenue engine. If you found today's episode valuable, we ask that you support the show's growth in 3 ways. First, share the episode with your friends and colleagues. Second, follow me on social media at Meet Jeff Davis on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. And finally, give us feedback on who you'd like to see on the show next. That's all for this episode. We look forward to having you join us next time where we continue the conversation on how to build a high-performing revenue engine.